there are those who think that, no, there aren't any eternal principles that apply to me because I or my product or my service or my team is just so unique. And I think that sort of terminal uniqueness, as I call it, or someone just thinks that there's nothing that anyone ever learned can ever be applicable to them, that's delusional.
Welcome to the How Leaders Think podcast, the show that transforms your mind by giving you new ways to think. I'm your host, Kenny Lange, and with me today is the Ben Wolf. He is the founder and CEO of Wolfedge Integrators. Man, I paused for a long time. I really had you on the edge of your seat. And it's just a cool name for a company, too. I'm really sad that my name isn't cool like yours. But he started his entrepreneurial career as a key executive at a mission-driven, technology-powered startup running on EOS, which is the entrepreneurial operating system, if you didn't know. And he built most of its operations and helped it grow to become one of the largest, fastest-growing organizations of its type in the state after just 3 years. Ben founded Wolfedge Integrators because he believes that there is a right fit fractional integrator for every organization who needs it and is ready for one, because those are two different things in my experience. Through WEI, he serves clients as a fractional integrator and curates and develops an elite team of other fractional integrators for the firm's clients. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Thank you, Kenny. Amazing to be here.
Well, it is so good to have you here. As I told you before, been a fan of yours, followed your content on LinkedIn. And so I can nerd out in our conversation, and I don't care if anybody listens. I mean, I do care, but it's for my own gratification, right? It's like people say all the time, they're getting free counseling or therapy or business advice in these interviews.
Well, I'm getting free flattery, so I appreciate that.
There you go. There's an exchange of value, and this is what the marketplace is all about. Well, tell me, Ben, what is on your mind?
What is on my mind is burned out business owners, people who, branched out on their own and started their business, or branched out in their business, or inherited their business, from family, whatever it happens to be, to make a big impact, have a good life, make great service, products, do great services, and that's what they love, maybe making big deals, and it gets beyond a certain point and it gets frustrating. Things take longer. They don't get where you want it to be. Life is not like how you expected. You're burnt out. Things just aren't working. Can't get your people to do what you want, or can't get your people to be the way you want. You just are frustrated and burnt out and feel like, anyway, so that's what's on my mind, is those burnt out, frustrated business owners.
That is a great topic. One that I think probably needs a bit more talking about, but I'm curious, as much as you and I may see this in our LinkedIn feeds, and there's expert research and all these things, but it keeps happening, right? Like if it's such an easy thing to prevent, as some people might, espouse in a LinkedIn post, why does this keep happening? What's the thinking that is keeping us in this burnt out mode for so many business owners?
Well, that is a great question. I definitely don't think it is easy. I mean, there is not an easy solution. What is keeping us in that? I think there's a mindset that a lot of us have, that if I technically can figure it out, or if the people who grew up in my business on my team, if I think that they could figure it out, and they also who happen to be at a lower price tag, and if I can figure it out, if they could figure it out without spending any more money, then we've got to figure it out. And there's just this resistance to investing in yourself, investing in your team, or investing in your business, to move faster. Even though maybe not all, but most business owners, most founders are very ADD. I mean, they really, not just because of ADD, they really want to move fast. Like they want fast progress. They want to move fast. They want to grow fast. They want to move fast. They want to build fast. And that's part of why they're frustrated and burnt out, because they're not moving. I mean, they got they went fast for a while, and then it got frustrating because things stopped moving fast. They hit a ceiling or a bunch of ceilings.
Yeah.
And so I think that the mindset that's getting in our way is this thinking that I have to do it on my own, or my team has to do it on their own. And I think that's one of the main things that's getting in our way, getting in our own way of not trying the new things that could get us where we want to go faster, which is what we want.
Right. I'd be curious your thought on the speed element, because that really resonates with me. You ask most visionaries, when do you want things? Yesterday. Which can be very frustrating to most integrators or operators, right?
Yeah, I have a story like that when I started. But yeah.
Do you think it's more about a longevity at trying to sprint versus the distance between current reality and expectation that is more responsible for the burnout? Because obviously you could sprint for a long time, but it's meant to be a sprint. Like, you could fatigue very quickly, and it's sort of like these peaks and valleys, right? Where you're executing, and then you hit this roadblock, or you just keep executing, and eventually you are the bottleneck. You have to rest your mind, your body, your soul in the process. Where do you think that balance is on responsibility for this burnout?
Meaning whether it's burnout from sprinting too long, or do you mean what's the other option? Meaning like from impatience of how long
it could be
taking?
Impatience, but just the distance between current reality and desired reality, or that future state that they're working towards. You mentioned that there may be just roadblock. And if you feel constantly blocked, like you're not moving fast at all. So is it moving fast for too long, or not moving fast at all that would be more likely to cause burnout, in your opinion?
I think it's probably the sprinting thing, but it's a sprinting thing combined with not feeling like you're making real progress. Meaning if they were sprinting, and I think they felt like at some stage earlier in growth, they did feel like they were sprinting, and they did feel like they were growing fast, and it's very exhilarating. Right? Even though you're sprinting, and even though you're exhausted, it's also exhilarating. But at some point, they got to the point, because they're hitting the ceiling. These ceilings are hitting obstacles, and not sure how to, trying one thing and then trying another thing and then trying another thing and not overcoming it. So it's like sprinting, but on a treadmill. So you don't really feel like you're accomplishing. Yeah. It's not like you don't have that exhilaration that goes along with it. And yes, I guess you could be exhausted just from sprinting, but I think that it's combined with the frustration of not seeing the progress that you want, and not, just feeling stuck, like you're running in the hamster wheel they talk about, or the treadmill, whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's the combination. I think that makes it so burny outy.
Burnout is. I hope that's a term that's in your book.
Yeah,
if not, maybe on the
gonna pick that
maybe
up
we
right
could
away.
Get that into the revised version, like a second print. We'll put in burnouty. So yeah, so sprinting like on a treadmill, like it's all the activity without the reward of like crossing a finish line or a milestone.
Right. Limited reward, yeah.
Yeah. So if they're experiencing that, we have the classic Einstein's definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. You mentioned that a lot of the business owners, leaders that you've observed or even worked with, they're not trying new things. They're not innovating approaches. What's getting in the way of that? Because when you think visionary, you think, 90, they got 100 ideas before lunchtime. Now, most of those are probably trash, but there's a nugget in there somewhere. What is preventing the innovation towards new approach?
Well, I think it's because there's, their people's ideas are in the areas where they have expertise, right? Like I have, what's in my product, my service, my sales, whatever my superpowers are. That's the areas where I'm having most of my creativity. But in running a business, which runs according to the principles, and will run and will grow and succeed according to the principles that most other businesses run according to, that's not your area of passion. It's not where most of your innovation is going to come. And the truth is a lot of these things don't require innovation. It just requires you to, bring in experts. And this is where I get to, I guess, the who not how concept, right? Is what's going to get over that hump of we have to figure this out on our own. And yet, as you said, definition of insanity, we keep trying to reinvent the wheel. Things are taking 5 times longer than they have to. That's why we have all this frustration and burnout. And I think that Dan Sullivan talks about this who not how concept. He's been talking about it for decades. He wrote a book on it by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy, who we were talking about before we started recording. And so the who not how concept is, instead of asking, okay, how can I do this? How can we figure this out? How can we reinvent the wheel? I mean, you don't call it that when you're doing it, but you're like, how can we figure this out? Okay, you know what? This thing that you're trying to figure out, how do you manage a team? How do you structure this kind of company? How do we do this when we have 30 people instead of 20 people or 15 people? Like, all these things have been solved before. You don't have to figure that out for the first time. That's why things are taking you so long. So instead of asking, how do we do this? How do we do that? Ask, who can help me do this? And that's where we come into, for example, like our firm is Fractional Chief Operating Officers or COOs, integrators. And so it's these people have built companies like the one you want yours to be before multiple times. Yeah. And they work with a team of other people that have all done that before, some in similar industries. And so they know what to do. They see where the destination you want to be at. They get into your team as a fractional COO or integrator, or any other kind of fractional executive. If you're talking about a marketing challenge, a CMO, if you're talking about a sales challenge, a CSO, if you're talking about technology challenge, a CIO, CTO, CISO, whatever that, or finance, CFO, fractional. And they can come in there. They've dealt with this before. They take your destination where you want to go. They look at and figure out where you are currently, figure out a path how to get there, and drive execution on it because they've done it before. So sort of that who not how. Bring in somebody that's actually done this before, who doesn't have to reinvent the wheel, and you can actually go a lot faster. It doesn't mean it's easy, but you can go a lot faster. And because you don't have to figure it out. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. So I guess that who not how concept is what I wish people would remind themselves of, or maybe read that book, listen to a podcast on it, on this concept of who, not how. Ask yourself, who can help me do this? Who's done it before? Instead of how can I do this, which can only, is just a recipe for tons of work and, slower results.
Yeah. Which I could not more highly recommend that book. So go out, find it. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. It's a great read. It's also on Audible and a great listen. I think that they put some bonus extras where Dr. Hardy interviews Dan at the end of each chapter, so you get a little extra straight from the authors. Nice. But as you say that, the thing that pops up in my head is a lot of times visionaries and visionary types, they may know, like, oh yeah, plenty of people have done this, so they're not confused about the fact that what they're trying to build has been built by somebody somewhere out there. But there can be I don't want to say a strict adherence, but sort of a closed handheld thought of, yeah, but I'm going to do this my way, or I got a particular perspective or method or something else, because everybody thinks that they're the next, $1 billion unicorn or what have you. How have you and your team interacted with these visionaries? Probably not the ones that are calling you, because they've, found some humility to say, I don't know everything. But the ones that haven't, how do you interact and challenge politely those assumptions that, yes, somebody else has done it and probably could get me, all the money and operational efficiencies I want, but maybe it's because it wasn't my idea somehow that makes me less of a pioneer, innovator, visionary CEO?
Yeah, it's funny. That idea you threw in at the very end about it's not my idea. I think of that even as a separate challenge that you do have with some people who feel like everything has to be their idea. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. to the extent someone's really like that, I think that's a core values thing that, at least with my firm, would not be a good fit. If, because, it's not going to work with their team, much less with us. That, we have to, if you have to posture yourself and make the owner think of every idea that you thought of so that they'll think it's their idea. Otherwise, so they don't reject it. That's going to be tough, at least for us, to work with somebody like that, honestly. But to your point before about, to your point right before that about, the uniqueness of each business, the uniqueness of each concept, and there is legitimacy to that, of course. And what I ask people to understand is that 80% of your business is not unique. I mean, 80% of the way you need to run your business is according to eternal good business running principles.
Right.
Anybody who's run a business of a certain size and has learned what to do can have a better way of doing than what you would just figure out through trial and error, over a 5 times longer period. And it can just save you the time. Now, there's that 20% of you that is unique, of your business or your product, your service, your team, your customers, that is unique. And I think the key is, and what all the members of my team, the COOs and integrators, who've owned or run businesses that are on the Wolfedge Integrators team, what they all do, what I do, is try to marry together that knowledge of the eternal principles of what works in business and what works in any business, and marry those together with the discovery process at the beginning of every engagement to learn about you, learn about your customers, learn about your team, learn about your product, learn about your service, learn about the things that do make you unique and the unique challenges that you face and in your region and your community and everything, that you're dealing with, it is unique, and marry those two things together, not replace that, not steamroll over it and say there's one way to do things that is right everywhere. I mean, if you're worried that someone's going to do that, yes, you do not want someone who's going to do that. You don't want someone that's going to steamroll over and have a one size fits all approach. That is not going to be a good fit, because it's going to ignore that 20% that does make you and your team and your product or service unique. And so our goal is to do some discovery at the beginning of an engagement and marry together that experience of what really works and what is the eternal principles, marry those together with what's unique about you, apply those eternal principles, in a slightly unique way for you and your team and your product and service. And I think that's the way you get that. And there are those who think that, no, there aren't any eternal principles that apply to me because I or my product or my service or my team is just so unique. And I think that sort of terminal uniqueness, as I call it, where someone just thinks that there's nothing that anyone ever learned can ever be applicable to them, unless they've spent 5 years here full time and they just, kind of inculcate it into everything, that's delusional. Sorry to say, but that's, it's, you're not terminally unique. I mean, it's just going to make you, it's just going to punish yourself by making yourself wait much longer and through much more heartache than you really have to, because you don't have to give up what makes you unique to marry that uniqueness together with, eternal good management principles and good management experience, to get to the desire that you uniquely have of what you want to bring into the world, what you want for your life, the impact you want to make on your community or your team, or the world. I mean, depending on what kind of business you're in and what your mission is.
Right. I love that. And I love you give me a new phrase, the terminally unique. So I'm going to borrow that one. Have
you
some
don't
people
have to pay me anything for that.
Fantastic. Cause I got several people I'd probably like to go introduce it to. I'll let you know if I still have a relationship with them afterwards. But, so if somebody's let's say they've gotten over their terminal uniqueness, and they're moving, they're growing, but maybe they're stuck. How would you recommend owners, leadership teams, even identify when the right time to bring in fractional leadership? Because as you mentioned, it's not just that fractional second in command type position. It can really go across the range. I mean, as your book subtitle says, it's executive talent you thought was out of reach. So when is the right time to start thinking about fractional leadership, and how would you contrast it from, say, hiring a consultant to come in and maybe give you a playbook or something like that on a short-term engagement?
So there's a lot of very loaded questions there. There's a lot in those questions that you asked. When is the right time to start looking at fractional executive leadership of whatever category? I would say it's when you start to realize that you need someone who's done this before, right? You need experienced executive leadership, but you can't afford or don't yet need on that experience on a full-time basis. That's really when you start thinking about it. You can't afford the caliber of person that you need that has that experience on a full-time basis, or don't yet need someone that's not yet a full-time job, even if they would be doing it. So, even if you could afford them, it wouldn't really be a full-time job. So bring in someone of that caliber with the experience, not the beginner person that's going to have to figure it out on their own, but bring in someone with that experience on a fractional basis. And, at that point, I would say that's the right time to do it. When you need that caliber, you need that experience, but can't yet afford or don't yet need it on a full-time basis. And what was the second part of your question?
How would you compare the differences of that fractional leadership with a consultant who maybe has a time-tested playbook of some sort?
So the difference between consultants and fractional executives in general is that the fractional executive is sitting on a role in your organizational chart, in your org chart. Mm-hmm. They may be a contractor technically, but they're actually sitting on your org chart. They're sitting on a seat in a regular role in your accountability chart. If you have there's a sales role in your accountability chart under the COO or integrator or visionary, however you're structured, and the fractional executive sales leader is sitting in that seat on your accountability chart. They're not a contractor. They're responsible for the entire sales function of your business. Mm-hmm. Fractional CMO is in charge of the entire marketing function of your business, not just one product, not just giving advice, not just giving you a playbook, but they're responsible for the entire marketing function of your business or sales function, or in the case of an integrator or COO, they're responsible for running your business, right? The entire leadership team reports to the COO or integrator. And, same thing with the CFO. The CFO is responsible, fractional CFO is responsible for the whole finance function of your business. AR, AP, bookkeeping, all of that reports to them, whether that's an external outsourced resource, whether that's an internal team that's reporting to them, they're sitting in that role. So they're actually in a role on your accountability chart. In contrast, a consultant there's two kinds of consultants, right? There's the kind that give advice or, consulting, they give advice or advisory sort of services, mm-hmm. or they maybe do some kind of big research and they meet with everybody and they come out with a 60-page report at the end about, all the things that are wrong and all the things you should be doing. And they, kind of wish you luck. And then, as I call in the book, drive-by consulting, right? Which is giving that advice. And so that's what it is. So there's advice, there's advisory, there's, sort of consulting. The other type of consultant is an execution consultant, right? Maybe let's say your marketing firm, they do an element that's giving advice. They set up, maybe your marketing plan, and then they build your website and whatever, maybe they execute your social media program, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. They're responsible for certain execution. So in a consultant, they could have execution, they could have advice, but in any of those things, they're going to be doing so on a limited scope basis. They're going to have a certain scope for the work or the scope for the advice that they're giving. Whereas, whoever's, if you have a marketing leader in your business, they're not limited to just your website or just your social media or just coming up with a strategy and then wishing you luck with it. They're responsible for that whole function of the business, whatever that means. Right? You all determine together what that means and what exactly is included within that. But they are responsible for the entire marketing function of the business for your CMO, whether fractional or full time. Mm-hmm. The entire sales function of your business, whether fractional or full time. And so that's the difference with a fractional executive is they're responsible for a whole function of your business for as long as they're engaged with you. Just like if it would be a full-time person, as long as they're employed with you. That is the big difference.
Gotcha. So it sounds like a lot of it comes down to the results that they're charged with driving and the accountability and responsibility. Like they're going to be held accountable differently than a consultant would be, sort of can buy a thing off a shelf with the consultants, so to speak. No offense to all of you consultants. I'm sure you're great. We're going to go after everybody today. So we'll see how many emails we can generate. You can direct all of those to Ben Wolf at no. So say someone they say, yes, we're ready. We know the seat that the fractional executive leadership is right for us, as opposed to an outsourced sort of consultant advisor thing like that. As they go to find someone, it could be easy to just say, well, let me see your resume. Let me see what you've done in the past. Have you built something starting at our scale? Have you taken something to the scale that we want to? Have you worked with many of us before? And those are legitimate questions, but it could be very easy just to go like, have you built a company from X to Y and in what time? How do you encourage people to interview or recruit or find the right fit executive leadership?
Well, I think that the first thing people need to do is to sit down, take some quiet time, and confirm what exactly kind of fractional executive do you even need. If you're looking at this, right, is your main areas of challenge really mostly all surrounded around marketing? That is, probably a CMO. Is it mostly around technology? Probably CIO or CTO. Is it mostly around finance? CFO. And if it's your entire business, it's probably COO or integrator, right? And so it's important to get that clarity. And then the second thing you need to ask yourself and write down so that you're clear on it is, what outcome are you looking for? All right, what's the end state? If you're sitting here 18 months in the future, this is Dan, sort of a takeoff on one of Dan Sullivan's strategic coach questions. But if you're sitting here 18 months in the future and you think like, oh, I engaged a fractional integrator or fractional CMO and it was amazing. So list all the things that will have happened over the last 18 months for you to be able to say that this was an amazing engagement when I brought this person in as my CMO. So that you're clear what your outcome needs to look like. Once you're clear what your outcome needs to look like and what kind of executive you might want to retain, then you can start meeting with people, communicating to them, here's what I need, here's what needs to happen. Here's where we need to get, here's where I want to go. And you're not going to, obviously our goal as a fractional, integrator firm, for example, Wolfedge Integrators, is to, pull that out of you. But if you've already thought this through and, then that is good. The third thing I would say to think about is your core values. Is to think about what, because, a fractional executive, just like a full-time executive, it will be a member of your team. Just because it's fractional, it's still a member of your team. And it is not going to go well unless, just like a member of your team needs to be exhibiting your core values on a regular basis, so too the fractional members of your team need to be exhibiting your core values on a regular basis. And so I would ask you to be mindful of those things. Don't think it doesn't matter just because they're not there full time. Chemistry is important. Chemistry with your team is important. The way they influence the direct reports within your company is going to be important. So it's important to ensure that they, however you've defined those core values, hopefully you've done that work. Hopefully you're working with a system and soul coach like Kenny or an EOS implementer or whoever, where you've defined those things. And so you could sort of test for them, just like you test with any other employee that you would be hiring when you're interviewing potential fractional executives for the team.
Gotcha. And are there some assessments on the hiring that you would recommend, especially at the executive level, that might be helpful, especially if it's your first fractional executive?
Honestly, I've got to say, assessments are not one of my big things. So I haven't, I don't have a lot of, I'm familiar with them. I know Colby and a few others, but not an area of expertise or something that I use on a regular basis.
Gotcha. So maybe just if you have one that you found helpful so far in your business, just continue that.
I would apply that to a fractional executive, just like you do with any other member of your team.
Now, once a fractional executive is there, right? I can imagine that it would be tempting to just, whatever they say and whatever they bring, because they're the expert and they're bringing it on. But what's what's the interaction like in terms of like, hey, I want to learn from you and you're going to help execute, but also like engaging with them to have the right expectations of them because they aren't there full time, right? So what's the right amount of leaning on them from the whole of the team, especially in say like a COO role where they're responsible for running it, and you got a bunch of executives who are there every day, but you have a fractional COO who may not be available every day. How do you coach your clients about the right expectations to have on you and or maybe one of your team members?
I think people should definitely feel safe in challenging the fractional executive. If there's things that they say or they're suggesting that you see potential problems with or challenges with, maybe unforeseen consequences, you don't know if they're thinking about or accounting
Mm-hmm.
for those potential consequences in their thinking, say speak up, bring it up. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
as a fractional executive of whatever type, we should be leveraging as the visionary in the leadership team, we should be leveraging your experience, your knowledge. You're the ones
Mm-hmm.
who know your business, your product, your services, your customers, your team better than we do. Because yes, we're coming in from the outside. And so we should be leveraging your experience, taking that into account, asking a lot of questions, probing in order to learn. But at the same time, we may not think to ask certain things. And so you shouldn't feel shy about challenging
Mm-hmm.
the person, uh, or at least asking questions and bringing up points to say, are you factoring X into what you're saying or into what you're recommending? Can we just confirm that this
Mm-hmm.
is being factored in? Are we allowing for this to ensure that it's not being ignored or something that they're not conscious of? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but uh, but at the same time, they are highly experienced, and
Right.
so you really should listen to them. I mean, if assuming that they're taking things into account, you
Right.
really should listen to them. And I think that the bigger challenge sometimes is that is when people uh, don't have a sufficient regard for outside experience and outside wisdom and
Mm-hmm.
what's worked for many, many, many other people, and that sort of gets to that terminal uniqueness thing. But
Yeah.
assuming it's not rising to the level of terminal uniqueness, and even if it is, look, nobody, we always have challenges in every relationship.
Right.
But I think it's critical to take the knowledge of the team into account.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not sure the person's taking it into account, make sure to challenge them. Have an open and honest conversation. There's no reason why you can't do that, just like with any other team.
Right. So drawing this back to what you mentioned at the start of the conversation about burnout business owners. So that they've gone through the process, they've hit the wall. They say we're ready for fractional leadership to come in because we can't, for whatever reason, solve this problem, this obstacle that's in front of us. Should these burnout leaders, I would imagine after a period of time, you're solving problems, you're seeing progress and momentum build, they start to feel much better, and maybe they feel like, hey, you know what, I feel a little bit more confident or a little bit more energized to hop back in the driver's seat a bit. What is the right expectation on tenure? Like, is fractional leadership just until you can afford full-time leadership? Is it, hey, we need to plan on 18 to 24 months to really, bust through this obstacle in front of us? Or is it something else?
Well, it definitely depends on the particular role in the particular business, whether it should be long term or on some sort of interim basis. At Wolfedge Integrators, our feeling is definitely vast majority of the time we're there to be interim. We're there to up level the leadership team, ensure put right people, right seats into place, achieve some major goals and obstacles, and overcome some major obstacles, and then get them to a point where we can elevate someone from internally within their team to become the integrator, or bring in someone from the outside if there is no one internally who's a good candidate for that. So we're looking at it 18 to 20, I would say 9 to 18 months, as a typical engagement for a fractional integrator.
Mm-hmm.
And but that's not a one size fits all thing. I definitely know people let's say in the CFO space, that, you have a high caliber CFO in a business, you've got a controller, you got bookkeepers. You may never need that. I mean, if you have a $20 million company, a $10 million company, I mean, they may never get to the point where they need that type of CFO on a full-time basis. If you get that great high caliber CFO adding huge value, and for the day-to-day financial operations and reporting, you've got a controller, you got bookkeepers, you've got AR, AP, you got a whole team in there. You don't need that CFO to be there full-time. I mean, it's really not a full-time job. So I definitely know people, especially in finance, that are going to have fractional CFO be fractional on a long-term basis, be 5-10 years. It's definitely, I think it really depends on the nature of the role and what kind of person you need. Now, I would say integrator COO is an interesting case also, because sometimes, usually when people bring in a fractional COO or integrator, it's because you need to overcome a major challenges, this major upheaval that needs to be overcome in the business, and there's major growth that needs to happen. It's huge changes. But then at some point, you're not going to always have those kind of huge changes. So it's not necessarily the same person who gets once and has the capacity to excel really well at making major change, and the kind of person who's going to tweak and manage and just make incremental change over a longer period of time. It's not necessarily the same person. If you hire a COO who's great at making that upheaval change, they're probably going to get bored after a couple of years if, once that major change ends and it becomes more management and tweaking and incremental change. And by the same token, you bring in more of a manager and ask them to make major change, you're going to feel like a failure, and they're going to end up firing them. Yeah. So I think that's another reason why sometimes bringing in a fractional integrator, for example, can be good on an interim basis, because you can make major change. They're good at that, right? That's actually what they always do. And then they can help you elevate somebody who's going to be good, the right person for your long-term integrator, which may not need to be as much experience, may not to be as high of a caliber, and they could still be a great leader of the business and a great driver of execution, and great at incremental change over time. Once that major change has been done by somebody who is a specialist in that.
Gotcha. Now that makes a lot of sense, especially about the difference that you were just mentioning there at the end of big upheaval, big change management versus the day to day. I definitely found that in my experience, and I am actually going through that right now. I serve as the integrator operator at my church, and I've taken us through a major change, but now that's starting to level out, and I'm starting to get bored. There's no secrets kept here, so we're already working on a transition plan out of it. That. Yeah, no. My lead pastor is already well aware. But we started to notice that last year and said, I think with all the change that went on, you made a lot of sense, because you have a high, tolerance for chaos and organizing it. But once it's organized, then I sort of get bored, and I don't feel like my skill set is a fit. I was like, move me on to the next thing that isn't built out or not built the way that it should have been, and I'll start the process over. So that makes a whole lot of sense. Yeah. I wish I would have run into you a couple of years ago. You probably would have saved me some heartache. So if a burnt out leader, or maybe somebody serving a burnt out leader, I see that with some regularity, people who witness it, see it in an owner, care passionately about them and their personal health, because they want them to succeed. What's the first step someone can take towards bringing on fractional leadership, towards eliminating that burnout in the next 24 hours that would cost them little to no money?
Well, one thing they could do is, read the book, Fractional Leadership, Landing Executive Talent You Thought Was Out of Reach. It talks not just about what that is, how it works, overcoming objections, but also, actually goes into practicalities. How does a fractional CMO work, or a chief sales officer, or integrator, or COO, or finance, or technology? and just shows you actually how do those things work, right? So you get a lot of good information there. Read it, listen to it. There's an audiobook, or bring it to that business owner, right? Give them a copy of it. That could be a good way of doing it. The other thing, if it's an integrator thing, obviously check out wolfsedgeintegrators.com. Book a discovery call. You could do that in the next, half hour, whatever. It doesn't cost anything. That's what else? That's two things. That's two things that come to mind.
Okay, excellent. And I don't want you to leave without mentioning your podcast as well.
Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah, Win-Win Podcast. That is mine, and it's focused on topics that can add immediately usable value and knowledge for business owners. Very wide variety of topics within that, but no personal self-help, no spiritual, no politics, no history. But it's just stuff that will help entrepreneurial business owners, not solopreneurs, not big corporate, people that work at big corporate companies, 10 to 250 person businesses, things that'll immediately give them value. Win-win podcast.
Excellent. Definitely go check it out. We'll link that up. And then if anybody wants to get in touch with you or know more about what you have going on or just follow your content, where would you send them?
I would send them to wolfsedgeintegrators.com. We've got tons of good information there. Blog, you can reach out to us through that as well. wolfsedgeintegrators.com.
And I would definitely recommend go follow Ben on LinkedIn. He posts lots of great content and is usually tagging other people so you can start to see the other folks he's associated with. So, what is it? Dave Ramsey says thoroughbreds like running with other thoroughbreds, not with donkeys. So I use that. I find somebody I like and I spider out from there. So Ben, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom and sharing your book, which I'm excited. Like I haven't interviewed somebody who planted the first flag. So this is
Nice.
a first for me as well.
Wow.
Thank you so much. If you as a listener got value out of this and you want to help others, make progress on whatever their journey is in leadership, please like, share, subscribe. It would mean a lot to me, and I'm sure it would mean a lot to somebody else that can discover it. But until next time, change the way you think, you'll change the way you lead. We'll see you.